to Lesson Professional Livestream number 40. We're using a different setup here than usual, which is why you can see a lot more stuff than usually can. And this evening's topic, as we've been hinting at during the last couple of community posts, is manufacturers in this country who don't either sell many cars or don't sell cars in this country at all. Examples of manufacturers who don't sell many cars in this country but maybe sell quite a lot elsewhere would be Alfa Romeo. They sold less than 100 cars last month in this country. SsangYong, they sold less than 100 cars in this country last month. And then Subaru. Subaru in this country are nothing like they are in a lot of other places. They really, really are a small player in the market. There probably are a few reasons for this. One of them is that cars are very expensive, but also they don't have a huge range. I think they only sell the Outback and the XV over here. I don't think they sell anything else. So it's one of these things really. Things lead into another with Subaru. It's a shame because the legendary Impreza is a car I have driven on the track many years ago. I drove one in 2018 on a track against a Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution 10. And the Lancer, apart from having only a 5-speed gearbox, was a much better car. It's the same conclusion Jeremy Clarkson came to many years ago, actually, with those. Some of the manufacturers that have kind of disappeared over the past maybe 10 to 15 years in this country. Well, Saab, obviously. Saab didn't just disappear over here, it disappeared entirely. It's a real shame. But they've completely gone. Daihatsu, they are still very much going, and in markets like Indonesia, Daihatsu is a huge brand, a big seller. But over here, they didn't really sell many, and the exchange rate between the yen and the pound was not very good about 2011, 2012. That's when we pulled out. Then there's Proton. Proton pulled out also around the same time, around 2012. They are the second most popular manufacturer, I think, in Malaysia after Perodua, who are also sort of similar to Daihatsu. They've always been seen an awful lot as people who just import the sort of engines, I think, from Daihatsu and then just assemble the cars from kits. They used to kind of do that a lot. Whether that's true or not these days, I don't know, but certainly that's what we used to do. Another one is Chrysler. They pulled out about 2015, I think. The last models on sale were the Delta and also the Ypsilon. The Delta lasted from 2011 to 2013, I think. The Ypsilon lasted to 2015. That's actually still on sale in Italy. They're still selling that. It's based on the Fiat 500 platform. And it's been going forever. It was this single model that Lancia sell, actually, because they had the Lancia models in the UK and I think also in Ireland, badged as Chrysler, so it was very easy to do that. The other one is Chevrolet, of course. I had two Chevrolets, both cruisers. One we can talk about and one we can't. The one I had that we can't talk about was a very late one. It was a 14 plate. And that's actually been on the channel, the 14 plate. It was owned by a friend of mine who actually, I think he still got that actually. I sold it to him in 2017. I think he's still got it. Let's have a look at some comments now about this topic. It's a sort of endless topic that you go on for ages about any of these brands I've mentioned. Russell Hunter says, evening all, good evening, sir. Richard Hart says, good evening, sir. That's not my name, says, good evening to you. Mark from Bad Book says, good evening all, good evening, sir. Simone from Dog Classic says, good evening. Good evening, Simone. Russell mentions Chrysler. Yes, we've mentioned them. Daewoo didn't really kind of disappear from the market so much because what happened is that when General Motors regained control of Daewoo, which was around 2002, they'd only been independent from General Motors since about 1998. They still use all their engines and things, but the period of independence for Daewoo didn't last very long, about 4 years, and it was a really, really bad time for them to go to independent. They started going independent in the midst of the Asian financial crisis, and they just launched a whole new range of models. Now they do have other models as well that they're only sold in places like Korea, but the Nexia and Aspero were ones that they sold initially over here, and they were replaced by the smaller Lanos, the sort of slightly larger Nubera than the Nexia, and then of course the Ganza, which was at the top. It was above the Aspero, and those were entirely designed by Dave themselves. But of course, they had General Motors engines in them. The Mercedes followed in '98, but what sort of happened is that then they introduced the Takuma, or the Reza, I think it's called in some markets. That lasted a really long time. I think they sold the Takuma from 2000 to 2009 or something insane. But by 2003, they realised that day was a really, really bad word for quality, and people didn't really want their cars. So they decided to change the name of Daewoo in Europe to Chevrolet. Daewoo in South Korea lasted a lot longer. The first Chevrolet Cruze was actually badged as the Daewoo Lacetti Premiere when it came out in 2008. We didn't get the Cruze until 2009, and then the hatchback came in 2011, which is the one that I had. I had actually a very early hatchback Cruze. It was an 11 plate, the petrol one that I had. Richard Howlett mentions Lancia. Well, Lancia kind of had two deaths over here. The first one was in 1994, when they just entirely pulled out of the market. The Beta and the Beta variants ended up having chronic problems with rust, and Lancia were actually forced to buy them back. The rust problems were that bad, and it sort of tarnished their reputation throughout, well, the rest of the 80s and 90s, I think. So after the Delta Integrale finished production in 1994, I think they just entirely pulled out. We never got the second generation Delta over here. We never got the Kappa over here, although I have filmed one for the channel. They were sort of having a bit of an identity crisis, which is what they've been having for years. And when they wanted to bring Lancia back effectively in sort of 2010, really, they decided not to bring the brand here. They decided to rebadge Lancia models as Chryslers, which is why we got the Upsilon and the Delta. And then the Chrysler 300C went the other way around, was badged for Lancia Tamer over in a number of European markets. So, Bad Books, Mark says, Daihatsu 4-track and the Proton Jumbuck, very popular with farmers in Lincolnshire and Norfolk. Yes, the 4-track, do see them around somewhere in sort of rural areas. They did suffer from rust. I don't know where you can get parts now. Daihatsu haven't been in the country since 2012, but obviously I drive a 20-year-old Rover and I can still find parts for it, so maybe it's not so bad. But yeah, they'd be getting rare. The Jumbucks were based on the Proton Persona, later the Proton Wira. They were certainly cars that were very cheap, and you know, the engines are very hardy in those. They're all Mitsubishi units. Yeah, they had very bad rust problems, actually, very, very bad rust problems. The place where you see the Jumbucks more than anything else is actually on the Isle of Wight. There are several on the Isle of Wight. I've seen a couple of them there. They are just generally quite rare. They're not worth anything either, really, with Jumbucks. Simone Hundred Classic says the Daewoo Nexia was a Vauxhall Astra. That's not quite correct. It's basically correct, but it's not quite correct. The Nexia was a facelifted version of the car called the Daewoo Racer, or Daewoo Le Mans. Now, the Daewoo Le Mans was actually sold in North America. I think it's a Pontiac Le Mans, actually. And it was based on the Opel Kadett. I think it was the Kadett E from memory. Yeah, the Cadet E, um, and they did actually use a lot of GM bits. I mean, some of the sort of Family 1, Family 200 are the same, but the sort of platform is kind of similar. But there were a lot of differences between the Pontiac Le Mans and the Astra or Cadet. The day versions are based on the North American models, or rather, the North American models are based on the day versions, if that makes sense. Because I think they were made generally in South Korea, even for the North American market. I could be wrong about that, but they were very similar. The Pontiac Le Mans, the day Le Mans, and of course the next year is the facelifted version of the Le Mans. Bash Budget says, I'd love to see a next year again. I've driven 2 next years on the channel. If you look at No Budget Reviews, and next year's, there's 2, one manual, one automatic, both green, owned by a couple of friends. I don't know whether I prefer the manual or the auto, to be honest. The steering in the manual was not very good. I remember that. But I think that's just what they were like. I think that's just generally what they were like. I don't think the car was broken or anything. They're very rare. I think there's only about 40 to 50 next years left in this country now. Russell says, I took a test drive a day Takuma 2-litre CDX. Yes, that'll be the top of the range Takuma. The tax was £615 a year. Yeah, that's probably most of the value of the car, isn't it? If it's £615 a year. James 101 says, good evening, sir. Good evening to you. How are you, and how is the world of forward control Land Rovers? Mike says, oh, hello, Mike. Thanks for coming to see us the other night at the Volvo meeting. Yes, I make sure I go to the Portsmouth section meeting for the Volvo Owners Club once a month. It's good fun, actually, that. I enjoyed going down there on Thursday, although the road that goes from the M27 that I go to, the meeting sort of near Fareham, Portsmouth area, the road is really prone to flooding, and I actually didn't take anything more interesting than the Sanyong, actually, because that's got much better ground clearance for the roads that flood around there. Yeah, talking of Sanyong, they've been selling Sanyongs in this country since 1993, so it's 20 years. The first one that came was the Musso, which was designed by a chap called Ken Greenlee, who was a British car designer. And he made it look quite odd. I mean, it's a Mercedes platform, that one. I can't remember exactly which Mercedes platform it was, but all the engines, I think, were Mercedes-Benz engines and gearboxes in those. The Mussos are very different now because they're actually all pickups. They've been pickups since about 2016, I think, actually. I think they were from 2016. The new generation one came out in 2018, and they're still selling that. That's actually quite a big seller for Sanyong. Yeah, the Rexton, which is based on the same platform as the Musso, that's also a reasonably big seller. It's a big separate chassis 4x4. Unfortunately, I can't talk to you about either of those because they'd have the wrong engines in them. That's Not My Name says, do you remember the Asia Rockstar? I do, yes. And Stefan Driver Classic got very emotional over seeing one of those at Great British Car Show in 2021 because I think her family had one of those when she was younger. A very unusual car to have. I think Kia imported those, although they weren't made by Kia, if that makes sense. James 101 says the world of forward control Land Rovers is going well. Thank you. Excellent. So I'm pleased to hear that. Simone says, is this your last live stream until after the NEC? No, because actually, that's true. What I normally do is I do a live stream whilst I'm at the NEC. So I'll be doing one from the hotel. I don't know if it'll be the Saturday or the Sunday night. I don't actually know. We'll have to see. So I think probably yes. Mark from Bad Book says, do you know John Copeland? He owns the Black Knight Proton, yes. I don't know quite how he got his car into so many places. He got it exhibited, I think, at the RAC Club or something in central London last year. Um, I used to own a Proton myself, and it was an original generation one. It was a 1993 MPI 1.3 GLS saloon. The thing is about those Protons is that it's quite difficult to kind of work out what order to put all those letters and numbers in, because they're really only known as the 1.3 and 1.5 in this country. The basic car in Malaysia was called the Saga. That was the name of it. But for some reason, they decided not to use that name over here. They just called it the 1.3, 1.5 because they were a single car manufacturer, if that makes sense. They made one type of car in hatchback and saloon forms, and they didn't make anything else until the Persona came out in 1992, I think. Might have been 93 in this country. So they didn't probably feel the need to actually have a model name over here. They thought Saga would probably not necessarily be the best name to launch a brand with, so it went for 1.3, 1.5. So I had one of those in 2017, but before actually they had any attention. People gradually kind of sort of picked up on it, and by about 2020 or thereabouts, people started getting really excited about them, and I was just thinking, well, I actually kind of owned one of these cars before anybody else got really excited about them. So I don't know. They're not the best to drive. They're okay. They don't feel very substantial. They have the Mitsubishi. I think it's Mitsubishi, either Sirius or Orion. It's the Orion, I think, in those. The smaller one. They're very, very reliable engine. You just got to keep making sure you do the cam belt on them, and make sure you use good quality oil, and that's about it. Really, they do very well. Chosen One says that's what nominated. Still got some 4x4 magazines of Asia Rockstars on test. Excellent. No, that's what the name says. The Proton Aeroback. Yes, the Proton Aeroback was just a 5-door version of the 4-door Proton 1.3, 1.5, or the Saga, if you want to call it that. The Aeroback actually had unique styling compared with the Mitsubishi Colt or Lancer Fiore, loads of different names of Mitsubishi car that was based on. It was sold as the Colt in this country. I think the estate version might be sold as the Lancer. It's very, very, very confusing. The Lancer estate had some amazing rear lights. I don't know if you've ever sort of seen them, but they are incredible. Yeah, so that was the relationship between them. The 83 model was the one that Proton used for their basis. They sold cars until 2008 based on that first generation Saga design. It's the LMST, which is the last version ever sold. It's like a very heavily facelifted one that ended production in 2008. Still living on a carb or something like that. It's still got 1.3 engine. Simone asks, what was the last Proton released in the UK? So by the time that Proton came to an end in 2012 over here, they were selling 2 different models. It was the Satria Neo and the Gen 2 or Gen 2 Persona, because there was a 5-door, and then the Persona was the saloon version of the Gen 2. The Savvy, which was sort of Renault based, I think. I don't think the platform necessarily was based on Renault, but it had a Renault engine and gearbox. Why I don't know. It's the same engine that was actually in the 2005 Clio I drove recently. It was 75 brake horsepower D4F engine, 16 valve. I have driven a Savvy on the channel actually years ago on No Budget Reviews, and it was pretty bad. The clutch was horrible in it. Steering is very good. Ride and handling, very good on a Savvy. The rest of it's not good. It's really, really not good. Yeah, they were the last 2. Savvy was discontinued in 2011, which left just the Satria Neo, and then the Proton Persona and Gen 2, which are the last 2. Russell just says, are Mitsubishi selling many cars in the UK at the moment? No, they're not selling any, because Mitsubishi pulled out of our market really around the end of 2021 was the last time that they had any cars. They've been withdrawn from the S&T monthly sales charts now. Um, that's not my name. Of the FSO Polonaise. Yeah, the Polonaise was sold until the mid '90s. I think the last ones were called the Caro, which is the facelift of Polonaise Caro. They sort of went out for about the same reason, really, as Lada's, because there were some very juicy engines for the Polonaise or Polonaise Caro by that time. One of them was a 1.4K series from Rover, but Rover wasn't allowed to Rover wouldn't allow FSO to sell the Polonaise with that engine in this country. Otherwise, it would have done quite well. So they had to sell the ancient kind of Fiat 1.3, 1.5 engines that dated back to the 60s. And they weren't very good, I'm afraid. The car itself is quite strong. They're very strong, actually. They used to be used for banger racing because they were quite strong. But the engine's not great in those. And I think they're still on carb. They're trying to run a cat with a carb, and that doesn't particularly go very well, really. The Ladas were the same. They stopped making those, I think, in 1997 for our market. I think it was something to do with Euro 2 emissions regulations, which came in '97, and maybe FSO and Lada just decided they didn't really want to have to force those cars through the Euro 2 regulations, which is fair enough. Mark from Bad Books says, I thought Lada reintroduced for neither. Sort of. It's a limited production left-hand drive only car. I think you can buy one, or at least you could before everything went sort of wrong in that area. Simone from Hitton Classic says, the FSO Polonaise looked huge when I was young. Yeah, they're very spacious cars. I had a look at one at the Atwell Wilson Motor Museum in Calm. I think we were there, last month, Mr. Bill and I. We had a look at the FSO Polonaise they got there. And they're very spacious. They're not very good quality, but they are quite spacious. Simone says, this is about the Mitsubishi Galant. When my pop-up chat actually loads, so it's taking a while for some reason this evening, but this computer to load. Don't really know why. There we go, that's better. Yeah, Mitsubishi Galant was my favourite, really aggressive styling. Yes, the Galants, there were particular ones sort of made to 80s, 90s. They look quite good, actually. Mark from Babbitt says, a work colleague had a 1984 FSO pickup. Wow. Yes, I know those ones. Look like a long wheelbase Lada. The reason the FSO 125P or the Polski Fiat 125, they're the same car. They look like that because they were based on the old Fiat 125 from the 60s. And the 125 was quite similar to the 124 that was the basis of the classic Ladas. They look quite similar. Julian Knight says, good evening, sir. Good evening to you. That's what my name says, Tata. Well, there's two ways Tata sold cars over here and do continue to sell cars. They own Jaguar Land Rover. They owned them since 2008. And before that, they introduced a pickup truck called Tato Load Better or Load Beta, I don't know, one of the two, which sort of looked a bit like a Mercedes 190 from the front. They sold those in the 90s, if anyone remembers the Tata Load Better or Load Beta. Just realised a pun on both of those variations of the name. Mark from Bad Book says, Simone, the Gallant with the shark nose. I think that's the sort of last Galant they sold over here, wasn't it? Simone says, yes, there's one parked in Tesco the other day. So Tesco sounds very interesting. Mark's happy that they're surviving. The estates look nice. Yeah, the last Galant. It's a nice car, that one. Yeah, so it's about a Lada Yugo. I think I've been offered a Yugo to actually film properly. I have actually done a walk around of a Yugo before. That was in 2021. It's not very good. They're not very good. But a friend of mine's got one of those, and also another car that I think you'll find interesting when we actually get around to filming it. I've been after one for years. I'm not going to say what it is. I've been after one for a while now, shall we say? Yeah, Yugo came into this country. I think they started making cars for our market around 1983. I think they actually finished entirely in 1993. They really didn't have that long a production run for our market at all. It was quite a short one. But yeah, there was a brand that doesn't exist anymore. We're not talking necessarily about things like, I don't know, Rover or Austin or things like that. Those were sort of volume brand and relatively popular until the end of MG Rover in 2005. I was talking sort of more obscure stuff, really. I'm surprised that Alfa Romeo don't sell more cars over here, really. That's what my name says. I think Tata did a family 4x4. Tata did several 4x4s. I don't remember whether it was the Load Better or something else that they actually, made for our market as a sort of passenger carrying one. I don't know. James 101 says even Rails is a small French 4x4 the Overland. Oh, I just noticed the pun. Oh, that's really bad. Oh, viewers. Simone's just like, what is a Galant? But the insurance was too high. Yeah, and I understand that. A lot of this stuff for kind of the mid 2000s often has quite high running costs these days. Petrol's expensive to run on them because they're not very economical. You obviously inevitably got some rust on them. The tax can be really expensive, something like a V6 Galant. If it's the wrong sort of year, it's a keen on them anymore over here, I think. Russell Hunter says most people buy CUVs now, not something Alfa does. The thing is that Alfa do kind of make cars like that. So they've got the Tonale, which has, I think the Tonale is out in this country. I just haven't seen one. Apart from, actually, where did I see it? I think I saw the Tonale at maybe one of the shows recently. I think like the November classic car show. I saw a Tonale. I don't see them around though. They can't be selling loads of them. The Stelvio's a CUV effectively as well, isn't it? Which I think it is. Right. What other brands can we think of that aren't sold over here anymore? Dacia's not one of them because Dacia came back. So they were sold over here for a time. The original Dacia Duster was actually a Romanian-built 4x4 from another brand called Aero. I think it's the Aero 10 or 12, maybe a 10. That's the original Duster. And then, of course, there was the Dacia Denim, which was the 1300, 1400, 1410. I don't know what it was at the time. It's in terms of different names, those Dacias. And that was sold really, I think, only in sort of 82, 83. And of course, people just saw it as a rebadged Renault 12. So they weren't that excited about it. The 18 had been out for some time by then, and the 12, I think, died in 1980, from memory. Some people are very excited about Dacias, and I think they're honestly quite good cars. I think they're just like Skoda used to be back in the day. They're cheaper versions of Volkswagens. The Dacia is a cheaper version of Renault. In fact, the hatchbacks actually that Dacia make and the 4x4s are based on the Renault Nissan platform that underpins the Captur and the Clio. And the Renault Arcana. There's loads of different cars on that platform now. There's tons of them. The UMM Alta from Portugal. There's a UMM Alta. Actually, enough of Bugs, if anyone remembers Bugs. I certainly do. It's not great. When I talk about Bugs, I tend to go on terrible rants about it. So I tend to avoid that. It's better for my mental health if I don't go on terrible rants about things. Mark from Bad Book says those original Dusters look like an Airfix kit. They did. They looked very similar to something like the William Towns Interstill Hustler that Mr. Richardson had on his channel a while ago. Carl Wood says, I once owned a 1992 Mitsubishi Lancer GLX i4x4. Yes, I know the one you mean. I know exactly the one you mean, actually. The old hatchback shape, yes, but before the first Lancer launched around '92, that that was the one that the first Evo was based on. There wasn't one before that. Um, that's what my name says. What about Nissan Bran Infinity? Nissan Bran Infinity. Wow. Um, Simone says DAF sold cars once. They did, and the two DAFs that kind of continued after 1975, I think they bought the company, were the DAF 66, that became the Volvo 66, and then the Volvo 343, later the 345 and 340 and 360. That came out in '76, and it was mostly all DAF engineering. They even used the same engine that had been in the 56 and the 66, the 1.1 Renault Cléon Font engine, and that started a very long relationship actually between Volvo and Renault that lasted until the mid to late '90s, because the Renault Safran had a 5-cylinder Volvo white block engine in it, for example. Russell Hunter says Infinity, yeah, Infinity used to sell cars over here. They don't anymore. They went after the sort of Lexus, sort of BMW market with cars like that, and they weren't very successful. James Martin just reviewed Infinity FX, I think it was called, and that was a bit of a problem to sell. In fact, the Infinity, when I used to do the top 10 best selling cars every month, used to have tiny sales. Even when they introduced a car on the Mercedes-Benz A-Class platform, I think it was called the Q30, the QX30, and they tailored it really for our market, but it just didn't work out. They built them up in Sunderland. It was crazy. They did everything they could to make that car actually sell. And no, it didn't, unfortunately. And I think they pulled out 2019, 2020 Infinity. Carl says that Ian's friend Rich, yeah, he's called Rich, who has for Dacia, is still around. Yeah, he is, I believe. Simone says someone to DAF. What? Sorry. Yeah, Paulie Gattier says a bit late. Don't worry, sir. Martin Badbook says, I went to the DAF Museum in Holland. My DAF had a 33 and a 66. Gosh. Yeah, they were interesting, those. The 33s of Daffodil. Was the 33 the same as Daffodil? Was it a different car? I get confused about that. Jay Spears says Varimatic. Yes, it is indeed. Paulie Gattieri says, anyone mentioned the Volvo 262C? No, that's not quite on kind of the sort of topic, because the 262C was all Volvo. There's no DAF element of that, and Volvo is still very much alive in this country, and they're doing rather well. Mr. Planetman says, your thing is over here in Ontario. Ooh, another Canadian viewer. Thank you for watching. In Ontario, Nissan and Infiniti have a really bad reputation for loads on the road. Interesting, isn't it? Yeah, they sold the Micra, I think the K13 Micra it was, in Canada for a while. I think it's been taken off sale now. The video that's going to come out soon, we're talking about the discontinuation of the Fiesta, the Kia Rio, and the Nissan Micra in this country that have all come through really close together. And the fact is that Corsas are still selling really well. Vauxhall is still the number one in that segment with the Corsa, and so it's very strange that everyone else is discontinuing them. So we have to go into detail about that, really, I think. Julian Knight says, how about reverse? The Capri sold in the UK and not in Europe? Yes, the Capri was only made for our market from 1984 to 1986. That's absolutely right. Martin Badbook says, I think originally the Daffodil was the original DAF Carbon of 33. Yes, that's probably right. Mr. Planet Man, but the Micra sold from 2015 to 18. By the time that finished production, then we'd already had the K14, which is the current one, come out. James 101 sort of modern Dodges. Yes. we got the Neon over here. I think 2 generations of Neon came here. The Chrysler started marketing them in about 1995, I think, in this country. The second generation took over. And then I think they finished the Neon in 2005, brought up the Caliber. The Caliber is a very, very strange car. It kind of anticipated the sort of crossover things that most people are into now, although it was about 15 years too early. The quality of them was not very good, though. They're not good quality. Another one is Dodge Avenger, not Hillman Avenger, Dodge Avenger. It was based on the Chrysler Sebring. I've driven a Sebring and not an Avenger, but the interior quality in the Sebring was absolutely terrible. It was like one of those plastic trays and a packet of biscuits. Simone says, I think Ford will collapse. Ford's market presence was a very good video that Big Car did quite recently about the market share in Europe for Ford and General Motors or Vauxhall Opel and how they stack up today. And it's amazing that Vauxhall Opel are not even in the chart. That in about 1993 they were #1 in Europe. It wasn't even Ford; it was them. And they've come down quite a long way. So Ford, I'm not sure where Ford are, but they're nowhere near the top. That's Volkswagen. Martin Babbitt says, my father bought my mother and me back from the hospital in a red DAF 33. Very good, sir. That's what my name says. Do Isuzu sell anything now? They don't know. They didn't sell many cars in this country at all. I think it might have only been the Piazza over here. I can't think of any other Isuzu model that was sold in terms of cars. Very strange. Russell just says, the Sebring had a heated cup holder. Yes, it did. I remember using that, actually. Richard says, the Caliber advert was good. Yeah, it was anything but cute, I think, was the tagline. They had some weird engines in those. I can't remember what the biggest engine in the Caliber was, but for the Avenger and the Sebring, it was a V6. But there were also some really kind of slow 2-litre and 2.4 4-cylinders as well. And also a Volkswagen engine we can't talk about. Bordigaccieri says the AMC and Renault Alliance. Yeah, it was just a Renault 9 or 9 or 11, really. That's all it really was. But they were made somewhere like Wisconsin or something like that. It was somewhere really strange where they were made. I might be wrong about Wisconsin for the Alliance. It was maybe somewhere else, but it was somewhere sort of quite cold in the US or Canada. Right, I think we've been going about 38 minutes so far. James Hibbert asks a good question. Do you think Daihatsu Mitsubishi will ever sell in the UK again? I think the answer to that's no. Mitsubishi, because they're now part of the Renault Alliance, effectively the next generation Mitsubishi ASX is the Renault Captur. They're very similar. And I don't think they want to bother kind of marketing a third brand here when they don't need to, when Mitsubishi sales were so small towards the end. Jay Spears said, I think Dacia were badged as Renault in South America. Yeah, they are. There's even Dacia Logan was badged as a Nissan, I think, in Mexico. I could be wrong about that. Anyway, I think we're going to draw things to a close now. That is enough for tonight. Thank you ever so much indeed once again for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Like, leave a comment below, and we shall see you again very soon. Russell has made a good point there. Suzuki pulled out of the US about 10 years ago, but they are doing okay over here, and they are a huge brand in Asia. Massive brand in Asia. Yes, thank you so much to you once again.